Hello, my name's Barry Thain. I'm a clinical hypnotist in England, in the United Kingdom. And I've recently become interested in the law relating to hypnosis in Israel. There's a really interesting story behind it, which I'm sure all Israeli hypnotists and hypnotherapists will be familiar with. But I've only just discovered it. And it goes basically like this. Back in February 1975, around about the 20th of February 1975, a hypnotist in Israel called Absalom Drury hypnotized a 17-year-old girl called Yaffa Swisser at a party. And according to legend, Yaffa Swisser got stuck in the hypnosis and was stuck in it for a week. And she only recovered from this trance in which she was supposedly stuck after a doctor called Morris Kleinhaus, who was head of the Community Centre for Mental Health in Jaffa, spent a concentrated 2 hours working on her to bring her out of the trance. According to other doctors, Yaffa Swisser suffered no ill effects, and she herself said that she was completely aware of everything that was going on all the time. That single incident lay at the root of the 1984 legislation outlawing the practice of hypnosis in Israel by anyone other than licensed doctors, dentists, or psychologists who were specialized in the execution of hypnosis itself. And that's a really live issue currently, because a well-qualified, well-trained hypnotherapist has just been criminally convicted in Israel of practicing hypnosis without a license, fined, given a suspended sentence, and at the moment there are, I believe, 9 other hypnotherapists facing the same sort of charges. And frankly, it's a nonsense. It's a nonsense for a lot of different reasons, really. One is that I have never heard, I've been practicing hypnotherapy for 18 years, and I have never heard of somebody getting stuck in hypnosis and not being able to come out of it. The experience Yaffa Swisser endured actually doesn't sound like any kind of hypnotic trance at all anyway. It does sound like she spontaneously experienced either some sort of catatonia or perhaps some version of locked-in syndrome. I suspect that she probably experienced it spontaneously and that it spontaneously remitted a week later, and had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with hypnosis. So the panic which followed that single incident and led to the 1984 legislation outlawing the practice of hypnosis by anybody other than licensed and specialised individuals, was all based on a false premise to begin with. Despite the fact that the legislation came about, in my opinion, from something which had nothing to do with hypnosis whatsoever, one of the great flaws in the legislation is the way it defines hypnosis. You see, in the 1984 legislation, hypnosis is defined as an act or procedure intended for, or which may cause through suggestion, changes in the consciousness and awareness, body, sensations, emotions, thinking, memory or behaviour of another person. Now, that's a fairly strange definition of hypnosis, and one which I believe could only have been written by somebody who hasn't got the faintest idea what hypnosis is. You see, let me tell you a secret. Come close because I have to whisper it. Are you ready? Boo! Your pulse probably just changed. Your brain will have caused the production of adrenaline or cortisone to drive your stress response. And now that you are recovering from the shock which I induced by going boo like that when you weren't expecting it, you'll be producing all sorts of glucocorticoid receptors to mop up the cortisol so that you don't stay in shock for long. I just caused changes in your awareness and body and sensations and emotions and thinking through this film, but you weren't hypnotized. The definition in the 1984 legislation isn't a definition of hypnosis at all, it's a definition of influence. I've heard it argued that what it really means, this legislation, is that you can do things like guided visualization and relaxation and whatever, and stuff which in many other parts of the world would be known as hypnotherapy. You just mustn't call it hypnosis. So long as you don't call it hypnosis, it's okay and you can get away with it. But that makes a nonsense of the law as well, if that's really what is meant, because it's like having a law which says you can't eat chicken, and then deciding that, well, in that case, we'll carry on eating chicken, but we'll just call it sandwich meat instead. That's ridiculous. The Israeli law, however, doesn't outlaw hypnosis completely. What it does is it says not just that it can only be practiced by doctors, dentists, and psychiatrists and psychologists, but they have to have a particular expertise in hypnosis in the first place. There's quite a famous case of a 45-year-old guy in Israel who suffered from back pain, and he'd read that hypnosis was good for pain relief, and so went to see an authorized hypnosis practitioner who was a doctor. This doctor, who was authorized by the special, there's an advisory committee in the Ministry of Health which decides who can and can't practice hypnosis, and they had authorized this doctor to do hypnosis. The doctor explained to this guy who was suffering back pain that that he was possessed by evil spirits and entities that she needed to expel from his body. Apparently the patient did 5 treatments with this authorized hypnotherapist, and in the last of them the doctor told him that the demons were removed from his body except one that related to a past life, and therefore the spirit couldn't go out. She added something to do with another, in another incarnation, the patient having been kidnapped by aliens, and as I'm sure you can imagine, being told that he was possessed by entities, he'd been kidnapped by aliens, and all sorts of rubbish and nonsense like that, had a severely detrimental effect on the patient's well-being. In the finish, he had to get away from the authorised, sanctioned, legally qualified hypnotherapist and go and see a psychiatrist to get sorted out. And it took the psychiatrist 7 or 8 sessions to fix what had been done by someone the Israeli law allowed to do hypnosis. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a dentist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a clinical hypnotist. I've been practicing clinical hypnotism legally here in England for 18 years or so. I've treated hundreds, probably thousands of patients over maybe, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 sessions, and perhaps done more than 20,000 inductions now. I've got a lot of experience, and indeed for most of that time I've worked in close connection with the National Health Service here. I've treated all sorts of nationalities: Americans, Chinese, Russians, Israelis. I've treated all sorts of religions, Catholics, including Monsignor, Hindus, some lovely Muslims, Israelis, Jews, all sorts of professions as well, including a lot of doctors because of my connection with the National Health Service. I've seen surgeons and nurses and consultants and their families, and it's not a problem. Over 18 years, I've helped lots and lots of people have better lives, and in some instances, I've saved their lives. One of the local GPs that sends me patients wrote a letter which says, "Dear Barry, I'm happy for you to quote me. Many of our patients have used the services of Barry Thain at the Mindside Clinic. They've been extremely satisfied with the care they have received. Many of them have been successful in stopping smoking after Barry's help, often when they've been unable to do so by any other mechanism. Barry has also been successful in treating our patients for a variety of mood and anxiety disorders, sleep disturbance and eating control. I'm happy to recommend him to the patients of any other general practitioners." And the head of psychological services at a nearby hospital with whom I've done a lot of work over many years wrote, "To whom it may concern, Barry Thain of the Mindside Clinic has provided services as a clinical hypnotist to the Occupational Health Department since November 2003. This includes monthly group hypnotherapy sessions attended by more than 300 separate members of staff to date, and occasional days of speed hypno, 20-minute individual therapy sessions, for our health promotion events. He's well liked in the hospital, and patients have been recommended to him for a variety of physical and emotional issues ranging from hyperhidrosis to the neuropsychological sequelae of subarachnoid hemorrhage. He plays a significant role in our primary stress care programme. Having known Barry for more than 4 years, I can confirm that he is a good hypnotist, conscientious and reliable, and who works to the highest ethical standards. I've recommended patients to Barry myself and shall not hesitate to do so again." In Israel, I'd have been locked up for all of that. Why? Because in 1975, a 17-year-old girl had, I think, a spontaneous onset of catatonia and didn't come out of it for a week. Coincidentally, when it happened, she was with a hypnotist. But I think it was only coincidental. I treated once an Israeli Air Force pilot. I won't go into what I treated him for, but he'd been recommended to me by his wife, or I'd been recommended to him by his wife, who was a very senior doctor consultant in a hospital near here. I'd treated her as well previously, and I went on to treat their children, 2 of them, all for different things, but I treated all of them, as it happens, successfully. If I'd done it in Israel, I'd have been locked up. Now, of course, no society should allow people to practice anything if they're incompetent. But the law in Israel doesn't stop that from happening. The doctor I mentioned earlier, who treated the guy for back pain, shouldn't have been doing what she was doing, but she did. The law didn't stop that. Today, there are bound to be many competent, conscientious, well-intentioned, capable, dedicated hypnotherapists in Israel who are being persecuted because 35 years ago or more a girl had a spontaneous attack of catatonia which lasted for a week. That probably isn't a good enough reason to legislate against the practice of hypnosis in the way that it's done at the moment. The fact that Dr. Alex Aviv, the chairman of the advisory committee for the Hypnosis Act for the Ministry of Health, could proudly assert that we are the first country in the world to enact the law of hypnosis strikes me as being faintly ridiculous. I mean, you'd think, wouldn't you, if it was a good idea, somebody else would be doing it. Hypnosis is real. It isn't relaxation and guided visualization. But the law as it stands in Israel legislates against that too. None of it makes any sense. And the only effect, it seems to me, is to deny the people of Israel access to an option for healthcare which in other countries, including here, has proved to be very beneficial for a great deal of people when traditional medicine didn't work. And to persecute a group of well-intentioned, conscientious, capable individuals who want nothing other than to do what I do, really, which is, well, my chaplain, I'm an Anglican, I've treated a lot of Anglicans as well, and a lot of Anglican priests, and my chaplain thinks that he and I both do vaguely similar sort of work, in that we're both trying to help people get through their lives as best we possibly can. And I think that's what most hypnotists want to do, what most hypnotherapists want to do. Fining them, locking them up, threatening them with extinction, because some legislators, including some medical professionals, really didn't know what they were talking about, is just a nonsense. So I hope things get sorted out in Israel, for the benefit of the hypnotherapists, obviously, who I consider to be colleagues, but more particularly for the benefit of the population, because hypnosis and hypnotherapy can do an awful lot of good. Since making that film 18 months ago, I've become aware of a couple of factual inaccuracies. The hypno demonstration took place at a school, not at a party, and nobody got stuck in hypnosis. At the end of the demonstration, everybody was fine.